Is it time for Paul Warne to leave Derby County? That seems to be a big question among the lips of Derby County fans, as fans are now starting to turn the tide. We've gone from just a few weeks ago, Paul Warne being the best thing since sliced bread, to right now Derby County look like their fans are falling out with the manager. The performances on pitch don't seem to be getting any better, and Derby County seem to be falling backwards and backwards and backwards. And it's just enlightened by the fact that Derby County lost last night to Leyton Orient, a team they beat 3-0 home and away last season in League One. Now, a lot of people can talk about the players on the pitch, but in my opinion, we have a better squad of players now than we did 12 months ago, and the fact that Leyton Orient were able to beat us, although it did go to penalties, in my opinion, it wasn't good enough for Derby County. Now, over on Twitter, I have put together a list of managers in 3 separate tiers, which I'm going to go through in this video. And I'm going to talk about all the reasons why I believe that they are better managers than Paul Warne and could do a better job at Derby County. Now, obviously, we have to talk about the caveats of the Derby County job. We are on a massive budget, which is to be anticipated for a team in the relegation zone, but we are battling against relegation, and I believe that these managers could potentially have an impact and make sure that Derby County stay in this division. We'll start off at the bottom tier with the very likely managers who, in my opinion, are bottom of the pile of this list. There's 10 managers to go through, and I think all 3 of these could do a better job than Warne, play nicer football and get better results. Those 3 managers go by the name of Dez Bingham, formerly of Oxford United, Ryan Lowe, formerly of Preston North End, and Steven Schumacher, formerly of Stoke City and Plymouth Argyle in League One. Yeah, that's correct. I think all 3 of those could do a better job. Dez Bingham, in my opinion, was working with a much lesser squad at Oxford United than Derby County have at Pride Park Stadium, and in my opinion, Dez Bingham did a fairly decent job. I thought the sacking was quite a surprise from Oxford United, but the reasons why they did it was understandable. Now, I don't think if Derby County get rid of Warne, I don't think they'd go for Bingham, but I do think he's one who would take the job. Now, for me, the reason why I don't think Derby would go for Bingham is because I think Clouds would maybe see it as a sideways step rather than a forward step, which is completely okay. Now we go on to Ryan Lowe, formerly of Preston North End. Had Preston punching above their weight for a long time based on their budgets. Obviously, at the start of this season, it didn't quite go to plan. And if I'm completely honest, you get to a point, in my opinion, as a manager, when you've been somewhere for a very long time, like Ryan Lowe was at Preston, where you get to the point where you just can't take the team any further than you already have done, in my opinion. And that's when things start to go wrong. This team starts to go a little bit backwards. You can't really improve the squad based on the budget you've got and things like that. And that, in my personal opinion, is what happened to Ryan Lowe. Any Preston North End fans, if you are watching this video, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But I certainly believe that Ryan Lowe did a really good job with Preston to get them into a good position. Now, obviously, he's handed the mantle over to the former Sheffield United boss, Heckingbottom, and they're still in sort of a little bit of a rut, but I think a lot of it is down to their budget rather than the team not being good enough, if that makes sense. And I think Ryan Lowe had them punching well above their weight for a long time in the Championship. And then finally, in this bottom tier, very likely, we go on to Steven Schumacher, formerly of Plymouth Argyle and Stoke City. I think he's a very good manager. I think Stoke is a poison chalice for many managers. You don't really get the time because a lot of the group of ownership there and the board of directors and things like that want them to be battling for promotion, but ultimately they've got to rebuild into that, and they're on the process of doing that now with Mark Robins. And ultimately, Mark Robins is a very good manager. If he gets the time, he'll get them back fighting towards the top end of this division. But for me, Steven Schumacher was doing a fairly good job with that Stoke City side. I think the big problem was they looked a little bit too close to the relegation zone. And I don't necessarily think he didn't have the players. I just think it's a very toxic environment at Stoke, and moving forward, I think that's something which Mark Robins is trying to change as the manager there now, and sometimes that's really difficult as a manager coming in from a lower team like Steven Schumacher did from Plymouth going into Stoke. He probably didn't really know what to expect, and when he got in there and you have that sort of toxicity, which I think is there at Stoke, I think it makes it difficult to do your job because you're always under pressure. You don't really have that sense of, right, we've got 12 months here where I can try and make things work and then I have to hit the ground running. It's sort of a case of you have to do it straight away, and that's the situation that I think he had. I think at Derby County, I do personally believe he could do a better job with the squad we have now, better than Paul Warne. Do I think it'd be a massive difference? Probably not, but I do think we'd look a little bit nicer and I think we'd get better results. Now, we head on into the middle tier, which is the possible tier. That is the mid-tier, and there's two managers in this one, Tony Mowbray and Rob Edwards, formerly of Blackburn Rovers and Luton Town, respectively. Now, Tony Mowbray, for me, is a very 50-50 choice for me. I certainly think he would take the opportunity at Derby County, but I do understand he's had some health issues over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, which obviously meant he had to step away from Birmingham City last season, and obviously it's difficult, really, because I think Mowbray did a great job with Sunderland, Blackburn, and obviously I don't really think you can judge his time at Birmingham City because of the situation he was in. Now, for me, I think if the right job comes up, he will absolutely take that opportunity, and I do think Derby County could be that opportunity. I'm not saying we'd go out and play expansive attacking football, but I certainly think he'd have the opportunity with Derby County to build something and grow us to sort of mid-table security like he did with Sunderland before moving on from there. And that one for me is, you look at where Sunderland are now, a lot of those players that are in that team sort of came through and were in the growing process when Mowbray was there. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a possibility for Derby County. We then go on to Rob Edwards, obviously formerly of Luton Town, got them promoted after Nathan Jones moved on. Then obviously the relegation from the Premier League, but put in a very, very valiant effort in the Premier League season. And then obviously this season hasn't quite gone to plan and he's been removed from his position as manager at Luton Town. Now, for me, I think it was always going to be difficult for Luton this season. I think I did predict them to be a playoff side, but I did think, in my opinion, that Rob Edwards was going to be moved on at some point, because I think the situation that they had at Luton was they got relegated, putting in like so much fight and so much grit and determination, and it was a really good fight for them, and they did a really good job picking up some massive results in the Premier League. And I think when you've lost so many games and you've got relegated and you've put in so much fight, ultimately it sort of kills the morale of the club, and I think sometimes you just need that change. And in my opinion, that is what's happening at Derby County right now. I think we need the change with Paul Warne being moved on, and I think Rob Edwards could certainly do a better job with this group. I think the group at Luton, I don't necessarily believe is much better than our group. I think they have a very good set of players that worked really well in the system, but they've also lost some key cogs in that system over the summer, and they're probably going to lose some more this window as well. So it's a very, very interesting one with Rob Edwards. Do I think he'd come to Derby County? I think there's a possibility. On to the final tier, and this is the tier of managers who I personally believe are very unlikely to even take a meeting with Derby County if the manager's job was to be available, and that goes to the likes of Sean Dyche, recently sacked from Everton, Steve Cooper, most recently of Leicester City, Lee Carsley, the England under-21 manager but former Derby County player, David Vagner, formerly of Norwich, and Valerian Ismael. I think he was last at Watford, but obviously has spent time at Barnsley and West Bromwich Albion. Now, for me, I think obviously Sean Dyche, we can just get that one out of the way straight away. I don't think he's taking a championship job. Certainly not a championship job down in the relegation zone like Derby County. So as much as he's a brilliant manager, he's definitely not going to be on any list that we're potentially putting together. And he's also a Forest fan, season ticket holder. So certainly not going to be on Derby County's list, in my opinion. Steve Cooper, on the other hand, has obviously been at Forest, been at Leicester, and obviously had some really good times at the likes of Swansea, and then obviously at Forest, where he got them promoted to the Premier League. For me, I think it would be a good move to bring in Steve Cooper. I do think he's a good manager at championship level. I think taking that next step to the Premier League is sort of where his talents lie. He's sort of in that middle ground. You know how you sort of had players like Mitrovic and players like that who ultimately for a large period of their career just weren't necessarily good enough to play in the Premier League, but weren't bad enough that they were a consistent Championship player. They were too good for the Championship, not good enough for the Prem, sort of in that vibe. And that's where I think Steve Cooper is. I think obviously his former clubs, Leicester, Forest, Swansea, done a really good job. I think if he came into Derby County, I think he'd do an excellent job with this group. And he's been in this sort of position before with Nottingham Forest, where he took over them after like 7-8 games in that Championship season where they were bottom of the table, ended up getting promoted. Now, I'm not saying that that's what he'd do with Derby County, but ultimately he has got history in that, and I think he'd be a really good addition for Derby County. Obviously, there is some talk around his style of football and it being more pragmatic, quite similar to Paul Warne in a sense. But like Paul Warne has that record in the League One of getting results, Steve Cooper has that in the Championship. So it'll be interesting to see if that deal could be one that's potentially on the cards. We then go on to Lee Carsley of England under-21s manager. Obviously spent time with the senior team most recently after Gareth Southgate moved on. Now, Carsley is a former Derby County player, and I think that may make this a little bit more likely than a lot of them on this list because of those ties. However, I don't think he'd want to remove himself from that England's under-21s position. He seems to really enjoy the role, which is a really good thing for Derby County, but which is a really good thing for England, but obviously not a good thing for Derby County. One we'll have to look at if Paul Warne was to move on. We then go on to David Vagner, who got Norwich City. I think he got them into the playoffs last season, if I remember correctly. And a manager who I believe is a really good Championship manager, has lots of experience at this level and a really, in my opinion, good reputation at this level about taking teams forward. Will he be able to do it with Derby County? Will be interesting to see. But ultimately, I think he can do a job in the Championship, but he just needs that right opportunity. And Norwich, they wanted a little bit too much, in my opinion. Now, we go on to the final one, which is Valérien Ismael. And obviously, he spent time at West Brom, he spent time at Watford, and obviously those seasons at Barnsley, where he did really, really well. For me, I think Ismael would be a really, really good appointment for Derby County. Sticks to the similar sort of principles of Paul Warne, hard work, high press, things like that. But I think he just adds that extra element of coaching. A manager who I would love to have seen Derby County get is Carlos Corberán, but obviously way too good for us right now, and that's why he's made that move to Valencia. Now, we've gone through the list of managers who I personally believe could do a better job than Paul Warne. You can obviously let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and I'll catch you in my next video.